Hey everybody, welcome back to Dagish America Presents. I'm your host, Ben Harrell, and you're listening to Season 6, where we've been exploring the many dimensions of leadership in the fumigation industry. So far this season, we've talked about safety, time management, team building, mentoring, and crisis response. But today, we're focusing on something just as important to our long-term success, the customer. In this episode, we're talking about what it means to lead with customer service excellence. Because in our industry, where timing, trust, and compliance matter more than ever, great customer service isn't just a courtesy, it's a competitive advantage. Whether you're resolving a complaint, walking a client through a complex treatment plan, or simply showing up on time and communicating clearly, leadership sets the tone. And how you treat your clients directly reflects the culture you've built inside your team. And to help us break it all down, I'm joined by John Mueller, president and owner of the Fumigation Company. John has worked directly with clients across a wide range of industries and knows just how crucial it is to lead with professionalism, transparency, and a service-first attitude. So, please help me welcome John to the podcast. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ben. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, no problem. It's been a long time coming. We haven't had you on the podcast yet, so I appreciate you taking some time to help us out with this topic.
Yes, I think it's you got a really good topic here, and I think it's important for the industry as well.
So I always start out by asking this question. If you could just start out by giving us a brief introduction to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is John Mueller. I'm a surviving fumigator for about 40 years now. So most of my experience is in the post-harvest spectrum. So between commodity managers and food processors, and it's been a wonderful industry.
Yeah, I know. You've been in the industry a very long time. I know you and I have known each other for quite a bit of that, at least my entire career. I've been here 22 years and we've worked together, not at the same time in the same company, but we've worked together through distributor, customer relationships, things of that nature for a long, long time. And I know you've always been a very knowledgeable individual when it comes to fumigation, so I couldn't think of anybody better to bring on for this particular topic.
Awesome. Thank you.
So right out of the gate, I'm just going to ask you, how do you define excellent customer service?
Yeah, so in some of our conversations leading up to this, a comment that you made was, how do you turn customers into long-term partners? And that really stuck with me because I think that's key. There's a difference between a tactical relationship, have bug kill, versus, a collaborative effort to really drive results. And partnerships are really critical. So our job is to focus on solving their problems. It's not to create hassles for them at all. These quality managers and commodity managers, they have, really tough jobs and a lot of pressure. And our job is to minimize or reduce that pressure, not add any hassles at all. And that's something that I always kept in the back of my mind. And you tell them what you're going to do and you make sure you do it in a timely manner.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I really love the term partnership when we're talking about customer service and servicing our customers, because you're absolutely right. Although we don't want to create any extra hassle for our customers, it really is a true partnership because we can't keep their facilities pest-free by ourselves. I mean, yeah, we can come in and we can swing the big hammer of fumigation and we can get them back to a zero count, but it's sanitation, it's structural integrity, it's all of these different aspects come into play when it comes to keeping the insect population low. And we as fumigators, we can make suggestions to these customers, but we can't come in and actually fix those things. I mean, unless we want to go in and sweep their floors every day, we can't really come in and take care of the sanitation concerns, but we can certainly kind of guide them and tell them from our experience what kinds of things that they can do to help reduce those pest populations, but we kind of have to have them partner with us to minimize those pests.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that briefly, what I view a partnership, I mean, it's just words, right? Until it's framed up. And how I would frame it up is, in a partnership, you identify roles and responsibilities between your customer partner and yourself. And just like you said, you hit it on the nose when you said there's only so much we can do, right? So what we can do is we can communicate those optimal conditions that will make us more successful together. So increased temperature, like you said, sanitation, helping us understand where the more intense pest activity is so that we can kind of focus on those. You have to look at everything holistically, but you can manipulate your approach with that knowledge. So, and again, that drives the partnership, right? They have to be able to trust you. You have to communicate very effectively, but you also have to identify roles and responsibilities and continue to discuss those together.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news is both use the fumigator and them as the customer or the facility manager, whatever the case is. There's a common goal, which is to reduce the pest population as much as possible. So it's always good to start with the same goal and then manage the expectations from each side of the partnership. So I think that makes it a little easier, if you could sit down with them and say, hey, I want the same thing that you want. I want your facility to be as clean and as pest-free as humanly possible. So how do we get there? Let's define who's responsible for which portion of this, and then we'll move forward.
Exactly.
So the broad conversation that we've been having this season has to do with leadership. And I know that leadership plays a big part in shaping those customer relationships. So why do you think that leadership plays such a big role in shaping those relationships?
What is a leader? A leader's somebody you should trust, right? And from a customer relationship standpoint, they expect us to come in and manage our own services and manage our own people. They don't want to feel like they're having to do that. And if you think about that for a minute, it seems kind of basic or passe, but many times I find situations when a customer is irritated, they feel like they're doing exactly that. And again, they're paying us to manage these services and our own people. So I think that's one. I think from a relationship standpoint, again, communication, all of these things start to really drive saying, hey, look, I don't have to worry about these people. They know what they're doing. They're taking care of me. And, that's what drives that trust. That's what they view you as a leader, that you're able to take this fumigation service responsibility and just run with it.
But yeah, John, you bring up a really good point. I know that there have been situations in the past where facility managers have been frustrated because they've had to go to whatever fumigation company they're working with, and say to them, hey, we have these situations, but why am I having to tell your people about these situations? You're in here once a week, once a month, whatever the case is. Shouldn't you be coming to me and helping me with these pest problems? Why am I having to come to you? And so navigating that relationship, and again, like you said before, striking that balance between who's responsible for what. That's why it's so important to have those clearly defined roles. Who's responsible for telling who what and reacting to that. That's why that's so important.
Yeah, and you've got to have hands-on management to be there and accomplish that. So that's pretty important. It's difficult to do from a distance.
Oh, yeah. It's very important as a leader or a manager to have direct communication and a direct relationship with those people. I mean, yeah, of course, you're going to trust your employees, your fumigators, your fumigation team to be able to go in and handle the job, handle the day-to-day portion of it. But as a leader, you do have to maintain relationships with the leadership of the customer as well and make sure that they feel comfortable being able to come to you when they do have issues.
Absolutely.
And speaking of having issues, I did also want to ask you this, a nice segue there, but no matter what you do, you're always going to have situations where you may have some customers that have a misunderstanding, or maybe a customer has a complaint about something that you either did do or maybe something that you didn't do. As a leader, what's your approach to handling those customer complaints or perhaps the misunderstandings in a way that further builds the trust rather than damages it?
Ben, you said it right there, is we're going to make mistakes. All right. These are major industrial events many times. I mean, there's a lot of effort. There's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip is something my mom would always say.
Yeah.
And so it's going to happen. So number one, don't panic and don't make excuses. really focus on being known for the correction and a timely correction and not the irritation or the problem. And I guess the other thing then is also communicate. If you do this with a sense of urgency and good communication, and then at the end, reflect on the root cause of what happened, learn from it, educate your team, and then improve. And if you communicate that to your customer, that's where you'll be known for the cure and not the problem.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's important also in furthering building trust with the customer. If you do make a mistake or something does happen, to own it. I mean, they're going to understand that mistakes happen. You have to own those mistakes. And I think long term, short term, they may be a little upset depending on the severity of the mistake, of course. But long term, they're going to look back and think, hey, you know what? I know I can trust this person because they told me when something went wrong, they addressed it and they fixed it. I know I have that level of communication with them. And so I think that moving forward, I'm going to have more trust with them than I would with somebody who would maybe try to hide a mistake or hide something that perhaps went wrong. So I think you really keyed in on something there. I think that's really important to make sure that people understand.
Yeah, agreed.
So what are some habits that you have or behaviors that you have as a leader that other fumigation professionals maybe could use to improve those client communications?
So I'm going to use a quick analogy and then I'll get into a few other things here briefly. But just think back yourself when you've hired a service person to come in and do something at your house. And, it's important to you. And maybe you have a little pressure. It's something nagging at you that needs to be fixed. And the contractor doesn't call you back. It's irritating. And my advice is don't be that person. Call back as fast as possible. Even if you have to get somebody else to kind of bridge the gap and contact that person to let them know and reassure them that you're working on it, you're considering it, and really drive to get back to them in a timely manner. I think that's critical. One thing that I think it's important to reflect on is that our services are not very transparent. So from the time we're ready to release gas and we kick everybody out or we move everybody away to the time we clear it and we're ready for safe reentry, it's just us that knows what's going on during that period many times. Yeah. And the customer is sometimes paying a heck of a lot of money and there's zero transparency. So, and at some point, your customer is going to ask after the fumigation, hey, how'd it go? And if there's not some communication, at least in intervals, to make him or her feel like they were a part of the process and understand what happened, where does it go? How do you justify, the spend with this dark hole of a service? So one thing that I always encouraged is give the customer, the point person, some updates through the treatment itself. And you don't have to confess sins. You can just give them brief updates. Weather's good, wind is low, gas readings are great. We're excited. Or we had a bit of a weather issue here. We saw it in advance. We prepared. We had some people on the roof checking seals. We monitor it closely. Everything looks good. I mean, think about the dialogue there, even in brief snippets of text, and how that will then build the narrative to support that service, build that trust, communication solid, and the customer now feels like they're more a part of the service. I've found this to be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of customers out there, facility managers and the like, that are pretty curious about what we're doing. They're interested in it because it's not something that they see every day. They may see it once a quarter, once a year, whatever the case is, if they're on a regularly scheduled fumigation. But to be honest with you, I think sometimes that fosters the curiosity that they may have. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to foster that communication and foster that curiosity and kind of answer the questions. Another thing that I think that we should keep in mind as well is a lot of these facilities, these managers of the facilities, whether they're QA managers, plant managers, whatever the case is, whoever's responsible for the communication between the fumigator and the facility, whoever that person is, a lot of these facilities, these managers bounce around a lot. And so if you build a really strong relationship with a person, not just the company, but the person, oftentimes they will move from that company to a different company or that plant to a different plant, whatever the case is. And the first thing they're going to do, or one of the first things they're going to do when they get there, is review their pest control program and their fumigation program. And if they're not using somebody that they trust, the first phone call they're going to make is back to you because you've built that relationship with them. So, we always say don't burn bridges, but I think it's more important to say build more bridges. That way you're welcome to cross them with those people when they move on to different facilities.
Yeah, and I'm excited a little bit if you can't hear.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I always say that great service is the best lubricant for future sales. And I look at it too, Ben, what you described as they do move, these quality managers and commodity managers do move around a little bit. And I look at that as the front door. That's getting us in the front door of the next opportunity. I also think about the back door, right? Who in that plant would take over potentially? You don't want to be just bound in a relationship with one person. Usually it was a maintenance person that I wanted to keep a close relationship with, or that second quality manager in charge, just to kind of keep a broader connection, a broader partnership with those locations.
That's an excellent point that you just made. That's extremely critical to remember. Not only do you want to be able to cross that bridge to follow that responsible person to their next position, but you're absolutely right. It's equally important to make sure that you're not losing a relationship that you have with the facility that they left. So you bring up a really good point. And something else I want to say too is, that word of mouth is so important, especially in our industry. I know everybody says word of mouth is important for marketing. It's the best marketing tool that there is. And that's absolutely correct. But in our industry, it's really difficult to market fumigation. It's not a standard common service that you can throw a commercial up on TV or whatnot, because it's such a niche industry. Yeah, we market. We do the best that we can. We market to potential customers and things like that. It's more B2B marketing. But marketing in general is really difficult in the fumigation industry. So we have to rely on our reputations, and we have to rely on that word of mouth in order to grow the business.
And Ben, that's important. I would always say, don't worry about making a mistake. We'll work on not making it twice, but do not hurt the reputation of the business.
Yeah.
That was critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I did want to bring up, I know earlier you had mentioned one of the things that you said about leadership playing a big role. I'm going to backpedal a little bit because this just popped in my head when we were sitting here talking. But one thing that I also want to say, you said one of the biggest things is to not panic. And that it popped back in my head, and I wanted to add to it a little bit. I think that's so critical and that's so important because the fumigation industry is fairly dangerous. We have a lot of regulatory requirements. We have a lot of safety protocols that we have to follow, and people understand the danger that's associated with it. And so they're very scared of fumigation until you learn how to utilize it. Once you become a fumigator, the fear kind of goes away because you become technically proficient in it and you know how to handle it. Well, the danger never goes away, but the fear goes away. So
you respect it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you respect it. But panic is contagious. And that's the reason why I think it's so important to not panic, even if it's a big emergency. You as the leader of a fumigation team, you cannot panic, because if you panic, it's going to spread like wildfire to your team, to the facilities team. It can spread like crazy. I've seen it happen. I've seen emergencies where management or leadership has not handled it well, and that feeling, that emotional state just travels right down the line through everybody that's involved. And I've also seen the opposite of that. I've seen emergencies happen where the leadership maintained a cool head. They kept their calm. They settled everybody down, and the emergency was handled very safely and very efficiently, because that leader just exuded calmness. And what a major difference that makes, because those emotional states are contagious, whether it's calm behavior or whether it's panic.
Yeah, I'll give you a case example real quick. I liked what you just said, but we had a situation one time where we had a facility under gas. It was a processing facility, and there were some issues that were out of our control. There was some ventilation systems that did not activate, and we had trouble getting an area cleared, a lot of trouble actually. And our timeline was pushed back, and the customer understood it wasn't, it was out of our control, even though we had kind of a good cushion there. We ate into that cushion. We knew we were going to be close. So employees started coming into the parking lot, and we were we were focused on completion, safe completion. And we probably could have let it go in time, but we weren't quite sure. We wanted to do double and triple checks. But in the meantime, our point contact was in the parking lot, having a fit. And the employees coming in saw this. And I observed as we opened it up, they were very hesitant to come back in. So what we did immediately, sensing this, is we brought everybody together and we communicated to them. We showed them how we cleared it. We walked them around areas and showed them that this is zero. And one of the things that I communicated with them is I said, look, if my mom and dad and sisters wanted to come in here, right now I would feel comfortable with that. And I would not put you in an unsafe situation. You do not need to stress over your job from this perspective. And just to have that very personal contact, and put their mind at ease. Because if you don't do that, those people's fear can really cause a waterfall of headaches for us.
Yeah, what you just said, John, what an excellent example of how to handle a tough situation through calm, measured communication, and then also, walking them around and showing them proof that the job was done properly and it was done safely. So I think that's a great example of how things can maybe not go as well as you wanted them to, but how you can handle them in a calm, safe fashion to make everybody feel comfortable at the end of the day. That's great. So,
yeah, I agree.
I mentioned a little bit earlier that our industry is highly regulated, and it is.
Yeah.
When you're working with dangerous chemicals like this, you have the respect like we talked about, but it is a highly, highly regulated field because of the danger associated with it. So I wanted to ask you, because we work in such a highly regulated field, how do you strike a balance between getting the service done, keeping everybody safe, and then also maintaining that regulatory compliance?
Yeah. So creating that safety culture with your people. Culture sometimes is cliched, but culture is habit. Good habits, hopefully, it could also be bad habits. So we want good safety cultures, good safety habits. And, setting from a leadership standpoint, setting those expectations and adhering to them. And from a regulatory compliance standpoint, at the federal, the state, the local level, the industry level, we are one of the most regulated markets out there. And it's critical. It's also critical to feed our information to support the food safety program of these facilities. So that would be second. And then service is important, right? Our job is to solve the customer's problem. But when you think about it, I'll emphasize that order of safety, compliance, and service. Think about this. You can do a fantastic job and have great results from your fumigation. But if you leave a warning placard on a door and customers come back, now safety is in question and there's panic on their part sometimes. And even when, our customer partners realize it was clear, it was just an oversight, it's still a strong irritation, right? It starts to really shape the trust. From a compliance standpoint, you did a perfect fumigation and you did not supply your pesticide usage form in time. You didn't have your F&P fumigation management plan, up in time. They had an audit come in a few weeks later. The paperwork wasn't there on the fumigation. And now everybody's angry. And in some instances, people even lose bonuses over poor, audit scores.
Oh, yeah.
And you could have done the best fumigation you've ever done. And it just all went to hell over the easy part. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple points I wanted to add to that. We mentioned that emotional states are contagious, the panic or the calm. Safety culture and safety habits are also contagious, in my opinion. So if you have a team where one or two people are stringent followers of the safety protocols that you have in place. Everybody else typically, you still have to manage it, but typically everybody else will fall in line and catch on to that safety culture. But then again, if you have a couple of people on the team that are taking shortcuts with safety, a lot of times, unfortunately, that can be contagious too, and you'll have people that will start slacking off on safety compliance and things like that. So it's very important as a leader to kind of watch those things to make sure that the safety culture is intact and that people are picking up the right habits and not following the wrong habits. And if somebody has the wrong habit, to get it corrected as soon as possible so other people won't start adopting that same habit. I think that's really important. And then the other thing that I wanted to say too is you kind of reordered it, which I'm glad you did because you're absolutely right. Safety first, then compliance, and then service. If you go in that order, you're going to have a successful fumigation. I mean, the labels for all of these fumigants that we use are very detailed, and the manufacturers of these fumigants have spent a lot of time and effort making sure that the labels are dictating how the fumigation takes place in the safest and the most efficacious way possible. So you're supposed to follow the label because the label's the law anyway. But if you follow that label, you are drastically increasing your chances of having a safe fumigation, being within compliance, and then getting the service done in a way that's going to be the most beneficial to the facility.
Absolutely. And, one other tip in there too, Ben, is, sometimes we have tight timelines, it's holiday weekend shutdowns and things like that. And our job as leaders of these service events are in the planning, right? So we should be planning well out in front of these jobs, a weeks or better is better. And if we're planning the right timeline and we're not rushing our teams and they don't feel the need to cut corners, the safety falls in, right? And I think that's a big part of not making them feel rushed is critical. And that's done in effective planning. The older I've gotten, the more emphasis I've put into this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. Organization and planning are so critical to making sure that the fumigation is conducted safely, because you're absolutely right. More often than not, what I've seen in my experience, when people start cutting corners, it's because they're running out of time. Just like you said, fumigation industry is typically done on weekends or holidays, or a lot of times they are, and your timeline is really tight. And if you don't plan accordingly, and you have to plan for emergencies too, what will we do if this happens? What will we do if that happens? So on and so forth. That way you have that contingency plan in place in case something doesn't go exactly the way that you wanted it to. But it's when time gets tight that people start cutting corners. Yeah, it's going to take too much time for me to throw that harness on. I'm just going to climb the ladder anyway, or I'm just going to get on the lift anyway. That's when things can happen. So I'm so glad that you pointed that out.
Yeah, thanks.
So I only have one question left for you, John. I ask a version of this question for everybody that's a guest on the podcast. I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to someone that's new in leadership or new in that client-facing role who wants to lead by example?
Yeah, as I've listened to your podcast, Ben, you always ask, like you said, a version of that question. I think it's really smart. People, especially people new in this industry, they need to have that takeaway. And I put a lot of thought anticipating you'd ask something around this.
Yeah.
But I said it, I'm going to repeat a few things here. Communicate effectively and in a timely manner. That's just showing respect for the client, the customer. I always think to myself, it's very difficult to over communicate. It's very easy to under communicate. And that doesn't build a lot of trust, right? But over communication, whether not everybody has an expressed sense of urgency. I know people that are just not real excitable. And sometimes, that doesn't put the customer at ease. But if they're communicating in a very timely manner, then that's another way to display that you're on it, that you are urgent about their needs. But I do think after communication, an expressed sense of urgency is really important. The other thing is be mentally prepared. When I would get nervous about, a job that was coming up, I would kind of walk through that in my mind. What are we going to do first? What are we going to do second? What are some contingencies? What happens if it rains and we've got 20 people on the roof? ceiling. Where am I going to move these people to? We can't get behind, right? And I think that's part of safety too, is really being mentally prepared for that job. And one of the quotes, and it's a little cheeky maybe, but I think about something Michael Jordan said, as he said, before every game, he'd already played it, 100 times.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good analogy.
Yeah. And then my last thing is more foundational, work hard, be humble. To me, that's simple words, but it's pretty important.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that you need to have, because we talked a lot about emotional contagion, so to speak, and making sure that you stay calm and measured in emergency situations. But it is important, if you're being called in to fumigate with a customer, there's an urgency there. Something has went wrong that has dictated that they needed to fumigate their facility. It's a pest infestation. So they definitely have a sense of urgency. Their brand reputation may be on the line. Product recalls may be on the line. All kinds of things that go into play with that. And so it's going to create a level of urgency to them. You have to make sure that they understand that it's also an important urgent situation for you as well. So you're spot on with making sure that you communicate that to them. The last thing that you want to do is give the customer the impression that it's just like any other day for you. You want to make sure, even if it may be, you want to make sure that they understand that it is extremely important to you to get their facility as pest-free as possible, just like it's important to them. So you're spot on with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is important.
All right. Well, John, thank you so much for taking some time to answer some questions today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, your podcast is important, and appreciate what you do for the industry.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention too, John, you have your own podcast that just launched too. You want to give us a little tease about that?
Well, thanks, Ben. Yeah, no, there's not many of us in this market doing this, and we are really focused on trying to give tidbits to this industry to help it. I think it's important. So my podcast is called All Things Fumigation, and it's on most of the networks like Spotify and iHeart and YouTube. And we've recorded 3. We're getting ready to record our 4th one. And I'd love for you guys to watch Ben's podcast and mine, and I think together we're going to focus on kind of improving things, I think, in our industry, or at least, and doing that through, discussions. Neither one of us know everything. It's impossible to know everything in this market, but we can share our experiences through, other associates that we bring onto these podcasts. And, if we can create positive discussions, even challenging discussions, I think we're going to provide a service for the industry that's both fun and fulfilling.
I agree 100%. The goal is to try to spread as much knowledge as we can.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? Especially when the wheel's broken.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, John. I really appreciate it. You have yourself a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks again to John for his insight. Leading with customer service isn't just about being friendly. It's about building trust, solving problems, and showing your clients that they're in capable professional hands. On our next episode, we'll be taking a look at innovation, specifically how great leaders can help their teams adopt new technologies and stay ahead in an ever-evolving industry. And as always, if you have a question, topic suggestion, or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@dagishamerica.com, or you can find us on all of the major social media platforms. Until next time, I'm Ben Harrell. Thanks for joining us, and remember, great service starts with great leadership.